International monitors have delivered what's been described as a scathing verdict. And I anticipated this yesterday, didn't we? On the Turkish referendum to grant extraordinary powers to President Erdogan. CNN says an initial report from the monitors found the vote took place on an unlevel playing field, with voters not being provided with adequate information, opposition voices being muzzled, and the rules being changed at the last minute. The report says the legal framework remained inadequate for holding a genuinely democratic referendum. As I said yesterday, on what we see, Turkey is becoming Europe's North Korea. And I mentioned to you yesterday the people he's locked up and the way in which he's behaved. Now he's got power to take complete control of the budget, complete control of the judiciary, and he is virtually the parliament. Erdogan, an absolute thug and a bully and a dictator. And Turkey have given him by a narrow margin the right to change the constitution and invest himself with significant power. I think is very significant. There's coverage, but it's not really to the extent I believe that it ought to be. This Turkish President Erdogan appears to have got his way. He's won by the barest of margins the Sunday referendum to abandon Turkey's parliamentary system in favour of presidential autocracy. 99.5% of the vote has been counted. The Yes campaign, which had all the publicity, 51.4%. The No campaign, who couldn't get its voice heard, 48.6%. Rural areas, like the Anatolian heartland of Turkey, voted in favour of change, but the big cities, like Istanbul and Ankara, voted for no change. The proposed new constitution will abolish the Prime Minister's office. It will give this bloke Erdogan, as president, total control of the budget, the power to appoint and dismiss ministers and judges, the power to dissolve parliament. Now, Turkey's two main opposition parties say they'll challenge the referendum result. How? I've no idea. This bloke virtually controls everything. Now, remember there was that coup on July 15. Many are saying he may have instigated the coup to justify his claim for power, because immediately that coup took place, he sacked 110,000 public servants, including academics and military personnel. He arrested, who the hell did all this, I don't know, 47,155 more public servants. Those arrested included 103 generals and admirals, 7,899 police and journalists, a provincial governor, and 29 governors. God knows who did all the arresting, 29 governors of towns. This is Erdogan. Erdogan, democracy gone, and he's been given presidential powers that no one in Turkey has ever had. He is strongly supportive of the Islamist cause. He went to jail in 1999 over his uncompromising support for an Islamic culture. He has for years assaulted the country's democratic institutions. In 2013, he jailed some senior military officers for life. 17 were convicted of plotting to overthrow the government. The mystery is, where now will this end? He's arrested 1,563 soldiers following the coup. He's banned all academics from leaving the country. The state of emergency is still in place in Turkey. He's cancelled their annual leave. All teachers have been forbidden from travelling abroad. The licences of 21,000 staff in private schools have been revoked. The resignation's been demanded of 1,577 university deans. 20,000 employees at the Education Ministry have been fired. 600 schools have been shut down. 99 generals have been formally charged. That's a third of the country's top military officers. More than 50,000 Turks, all up, have been detained, suspended and sacked. He's already jailed scores of journalists. 1,800 criminal cases have been brought against people accused of insulting the president. This is Erdogan. There are 85,000 mosques in Turkey, more mosques per capita than in Saudi Arabia or Iran, more imams per capita than there are doctors and teachers. Well, what's the West doing about this? They want to go after Assad? This bloke, seriously, methodically traducing the secular democracy legacy of Ataturk, the founder of the modern Turkish state. Is he being challenged by the West or tolerated? China might be the hope here, and certainly China's Global Times newspaper in relation to South Korea, it's virtually a mouthpiece for the Chinese government. It's run by the Communist Party's official People's Daily. And quite extraordinary, because China's an ally, it has warned North Korea, and I quote, this week, not only is Washington brimming with confidence and arrogance following the missile attacks on Syria, but Trump is also willing to be regarded as a man who honours his promises. The US is making up its mind to stop the North from conducting further nuclear tests. It doesn't plan to coexist. Now remember, this is a Chinese daily. This is the voice of Communist China expressed here about America. It doesn't plan to coexist with a nuclear-armed Pyongyang. Pyongyang should avoid making mistakes at this time. Now, Trump, I think, has done a hell of a job behind the scenes here, talking to the Chinese leadership, most probably doing a trade deal with them and saying, well, look, you better flex your muscles in relation to North Korea. Because suddenly this Global Times newspaper says, if the North makes another provocative move this month, the Chinese will be willing to see the UN Security Council adopt severe restrictive measures that have never been seen before, such as restricting oil imports to the North. Now, the significance of that is immense, because even though North Korea doesn't consume much oil, curbing or cutting off its supplies in retaliation for further nuclear or long-range missile tests would be painful and destabilising to North Korea. China supplies most of North Korea's crude oil. It no longer reports its oil shipments to North Korea, but according to South Korean data, it supplies North Korea with roughly 500,000 tonnes of crude oil annually. Now, North Korea has no domestic oil production. So much of North Korea's energy is supplied by domestic coal. But cutting off oil for an extended period of time, and that's the tough stuff that they're talking about, is probably the toughest economic punishment that China could impose on North Korea. So that's the lever that China has over North Korea, and it may well be that Trump has called the North Korean bluff and has got China on side. Interesting developments. I don't think they're as dangerous as some of the commentators think, but it's certainly a hot spot in the world at the moment. Hello?
Good morning, Alan. Welcome back to the microphone. I was worried sick, and so was Australia, when all the time you're away from it. About yesterday, you were talking about dipping into super.
Yep.
Pay for. Yeah. Now the thing is, I've got this beautiful property just outside Tamworth, but the only thing wrong with it is there's hardly any work there now. Unless Australians in the future start dipping into super, they're going to be buying property where there's hardly any work. And what you were saying about foreign ownership of real estate is 1,000% correct. It should be stopped.
Absolutely. And the immigration, Tony Abbott has said, I'll be talking to Tony Abbott tonight on the television show Jones & Co. on 601, and we'll be talking about other things. I want to talk to him about this cultural war. When are we going to wake up that there's a war on here? Christianity is under siege, our Western values are under siege, and we've got to take this seriously. And here, we're worried about people getting into home ownership. Well, it's not an automatic right, but at the same time, immigration contributes to the high prices and the Chinese entering the real estate market. Now, I'm simply saying no. We should apply the rules to real estate purchases, land purchases here, that are applied to us in China. And you wouldn't be allowed to buy a broken chair in China.
Unless we've got cheap power, unless we've got rates of income tax and that are low to encourage people to get the hell out of the city and get their businesses started instead of discouraging companies from leaving this country wholesale because of all these imposts that are put on them, then bugger me, we won't ever get people out of here. The country won't.
The easiest way to get people out of the city...
No, and they talk about the country going to be wonderful. It's a load of rubbish.
Well, Terence, the easiest way...
Backwards, I'll tell you now.
The easiest way, Terence, to get people out of the city and go to the bush is, this sounds stupid, to provide water. Now, without water, you can't do anything. If the Wentworth Hotel, and I say this over and again, whatever it's called, the Hilton Hotel, had 50% of its water taken away from it today, it'd have to close 50% of its beds. Now, if you provided water, a guarantee of water west of the Great Dividing Range, a whole heap of industries would spring up if you could guarantee water, and people would willingly live. The trouble is, we haven't got that guarantee. We've just been flooded for the last 2 weeks, and not one cup of it has been harvested. Moral of the story, in Canberra, they're not talking about the things the public are talking about.
Good morning.